More than 300,000 soldiers were trapped between the German army and the sea. The water near the beach was too shallow for big ships, and the only road home was not a road at all. It was the channel. A soldier stood in that shallow water near Dunkirk, shifting his weight because his boots were full of seawater and his uniform was heavy. Behind him, smoke rose from the town and drifted over the beach. In front of him, the English Channel looked narrow on a map. From the water, it looked endless. Thousands of men waited behind him on the sand. Some had rifles. Many had thrown away heavy kit during the retreat. A few held their helmets over their faces when aircraft passed overhead. The big ships were out there, but the beach was too shallow, so the soldier waited for a smaller boat. He did not know if it would come for his line, or if the next sound in the sky would be a friendly aircraft or a German bomber. He only knew that the enemy was behind the smoke and the sea was in front of him. At Dunkirk, rescue began as men standing in water, hoping the line would move. To understand why they were there, we have to go back to May 1940. Chapter 1. The Trap Closes. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France went to war against Germany. British soldiers crossed the Channel and joined the Allied armies in France. For months, the Western Front seemed quiet. Men waited in camps, villages, and defensive positions. They wrote letters, they trained, they watched the roads and skies. Then, on May 10, 1940, the quiet ended. Germany attacked the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France with terrible speed. German forces pushed through weak points, crossed rivers, and drove around positions that were meant to hold them. Allied armies moved north into Belgium, expecting the main fight there. But another push came through the Ardennes and broke through near Sedan. Soon, the danger was not only ahead of the Allied armies, it was behind them.
German armored columns raced toward the Channel coast. On May 20th, they reached the sea near Abbeville and Noyelles. That movement cut off large Allied forces in northern France and Belgium. The British Expeditionary Force, parts of the French Army, Belgian troops, and other Allied units were now trapped in a pocket. Enemy pressure around them, closing roads, failing supplies, and orders that often came too late. The Allied soldiers pulled back toward the coast, but their retreat was not neat. Roads filled with soldiers, vehicles, refugees, abandoned guns, and broken units. A truck stopped because it had no fuel. A gun sat beside the road because there was no way to move it. A tired soldier walked past a village and did not know who still held the next crossroads. The retreat also carried civilians. Families moved with carts, bags, bicycles, and children, trying to leave the same danger as the soldiers while the roads grew slower and more confused. The men in uniform were trained for battle, not for this broken movement. Maps changed too quickly. Officers did not always have the latest orders, and weapons did not solve the problem of being cut off. The names on the coast became more urgent. Boulogne was lost, Calais was lost, and Dunkirk remained. Dunkirk, or Dunkirk in French, was a port city near the Belgian border. It had a harbor, beaches, and a route across the Channel to Britain. Dunkirk was not a perfect rescue point. The beaches were wide and exposed. The sea was shallow near shore. The port was under attack, and smoke from fires and bombing covered parts of the town. But it was the best place left. Lord Gort, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, understood that the army was unlikely to fight its way south. If the army stayed in France and was destroyed or captured, Britain would face the next part of the war without much of its trained force. The question changed from "Can the Allies hold France?" to "Can the army be saved from the coast?" No army wants to be rescued from defeat. No commander wants to leave guns, vehicles, and allies behind. To save the men, ships had to cross from Britain. The port had to keep working in some form. The roads into Dunkirk had to stay open. Soldiers had to hold the landward side while other soldiers moved toward the sea. But saving an army from a beach was not a normal military plan. It had to be invented while the army was already running out of time. Chapter 2. A Plan Under Dover Castle. In the English coast, Dover Castle stood above the sea, with tunnels running deep into the white cliffs below it. In those tunnels, Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay and his staff worked with maps, telephones, messages, and ship lists. The room did not look like a beach. It did not smell of smoke or seawater. Ramsay had a hard task. He had to gather ships quickly and send them across dangerous water, past tides, air attacks, mines, and damaged docks, toward thousands of soldiers waiting under fire. The evacuation order came in the evening of May 26th. The code name was Operation Dynamo. It was an evacuation, meaning the movement of soldiers away from danger. At first, hopes were low. Saving 40 or 50,000 men would have seemed important. Dunkirk did not begin as a legend. It began as a limited rescue under terrible pressure. The first vessels included Royal Navy destroyers, minesweepers, ferries, merchant ships, and other craft. More vessels were pulled in as the scale of the crisis became clear. Some ships were built for war. Others had carried passengers, fish, goods, or holidaymakers. Now they were part of one emergency. Ramsay's team had to decide which ships could sail, where each ship should go, and when it should return. A damaged ship could block routes. A ship at the wrong place could find no loading point ready. The people in the tunnels had to think in hours and shiploads. A message from France arrived late. A port usable in the morning was sometimes under heavier attack by afternoon. Ramsay and his staff were not writing a perfect plan. They were repairing the plan while it moved. If ships arrived at the wrong time, men would still be waiting. Too many large ships in daylight put the rescue fleet's most useful vessels at risk. Every choice carried a cost. Send a destroyer, and it carried many men. Lose a destroyer, and the next day's rescue became harder. Across the water at Dunkirk, Captain William Tennant arrived to help manage the evacuation from the French side. Tennant looked at the damaged harbor and the crowded beaches. The normal answer was gone. So he turned to something that was never meant for this job, the East Mole. The main docks were damaged and dangerous, and the beaches were full of men, but the water near shore was too shallow for large ships. Soldiers did not simply walk onto a destroyer from the sand. Small boats had to ferry men from the beach to larger ships, or men had to board where larger vessels came close. The East Mole was a long breakwater, like a narrow pier reaching out into the water. It was not a passenger dock. It was not built to load an army. But in that moment, it became a lifeline. Ships came alongside the mole. Men walked out along it and boarded faster than they did from open beach water. The first day showed how bad the problem was. On the first full day, the number was frighteningly small, about 8,000 men. The trapped area was shrinking. German guns and aircraft were getting closer. Soldiers were crowding onto beaches and streets. If the rescue stayed that slow, most of the trapped army would not leave. More ships crossed, more small craft were gathered, more men were directed toward the mole, and officers tried to turn panic into lines. A beach full of frightened men can become dangerous to itself. If everyone pushes forward at once, boats can overturn and loading can stop. The work was blunt. Move men fast. Keep them calm enough to move. Keep the ships coming and keep the enemy out long enough. One heavy raid, one blocked route, or one broken order could slow everything down. 4 days later, more than 68,000 men left in a single day.
The plan under Dover Castle had become ships, queues, orders, weather, and time. But numbers alone did not show what the men on the beach felt while they waited. Chapter 3: The Beach and the Mole. The men on the beach did not see the full system. They saw sand, water, smoke, and ships. Many had walked for days. Their feet hurt, their mouths were dry. Sleep came in short, broken pieces, if it came at all. They were soldiers, but the beach forced them into a strange role: stand still, wait their turn, and keep order while every instinct told them to move. The open beach offered almost no cover. When aircraft came, men dropped flat. Sand jumped. Water rose in white bursts. After the noise moved away, the lines formed again. To a man under attack, the sky felt empty of friends. Many soldiers later felt that the Royal Air Force had not protected them, because much of the air battle happened away from the beach. RAF pilots were fighting German aircraft over the evacuation area, over the sea, and farther inland. That did not make the waiting men feel safe. The bombs still came, the shelling still came, and the beach still felt exposed. Men moved toward the water in groups. A small boat came close, took a load, and pulled away toward a larger ship. The next group waited. The movement was slow enough to hurt. A soldier stood with water around his legs and watched another boat fill before it reached him. He understood that the boat was saving lives and still felt the ache of being left for the next trip. Others moved toward the mole, where long lines of soldiers walked toward waiting vessels. The men were exposed, but the route was faster than carrying everyone from the beach by small boats. A man leaves the sand and steps onto the narrow structure. The water is on both sides. The air smells of smoke, salt, fuel, and wet clothing. Ahead, a ship waits with men already packed onto its deck. The line moved, stopped, and moved again.
while no one wanted to look back for too long. In a rescue, speed was life. Every ship filled quickly mattered, and every hour gained by the defenders behind Dunkirk mattered. The evacuation numbers kept rising, about 17,800 on May 28th, more than 47,000 on May 29, more than 53,000 on May 30, and more than 68,000 by May 31st. Those figures can hide the real shape of the event. A man stepping from water into a boat, a sailor pulling him by the sleeve, a wounded man being lifted, a destroyer turning for home with men packed on deck, and another boat coming back again. The beach was not calm, but it had to look ordered enough to work. If too many men rushed at once, small boats risked being swamped. If fear took over, the rescue would lose the thing it needed most: time. Men waited, not because they were afraid, but because waiting was the only way to leave. The soldier from the water finally reached a boat. A crewman grabbed his sleeve and pulled him aboard. The small craft turned toward a larger ship, rolling under the weight of too many tired men. Even then he was not home. He had only moved from one danger to another. For men using the mole, the danger had a different shape. The line stretched far back, and each man knew he was standing over open water. A bomb near the mole could stop the flow of men, and a damaged ship alongside it could block the next ship. Officers and sailors kept shouting simple orders: move forward, keep low, do not stop, make room. A sailor put one hand on a man's shoulder and pushed the line forward without breaking it. The beach was moving faster now, but the rescue still depended on boats surviving the crossing. Chapter 4: Small Boats, Large Ships. The little ships became the most famous symbol of Dunkirk, and their work mattered. Small boats came from the south coast of England, the Thames area, and nearby waters. Fishing boats, lifeboats, pleasure boats, barges, ferries, and other craft. Some were crewed by civilians, others were taken over or handled by service crews. The details were not always tidy. Later records tried to list the vessels and their work, but some stories became hard to prove after the event. Small boats did what large ships could not do. They came close to the shallow beach, nosed through crowded water, and carried small groups of wet, exhausted men out to bigger ships. For a soldier waiting waist-deep in the sea, that was enough. A small boat did not need to look heroic, it only needed to arrive. Royal Navy destroyers, minesweepers, ferries, merchant ships, and other larger ships crossed again and again. The little ships became the symbol. The mole and the larger ships carried much of the weight. Dunkirk used many kinds of boats, many kinds of crews, and many kinds of risk. A small craft took men from the shallows. A destroyer took hundreds from the mole. A ferry crossed loaded with soldiers. A minesweeper worked through danger again. At sea, the danger did not stop. German aircraft attacked ships and beaches. Mines and torpedoes threatened the routes. Shore batteries came closer as the land battle tightened. Ships were sunk, others were damaged, and crews kept going back. For a ship's crew, a crossing was hours of work. watching the sky, watching the water, listening for engines and explosions, and keeping overloaded vessels steady. On a crowded deck, soldiers had little space. One man sat with his knees against another man's back. A wounded man lay where others had to step around. A sailor shouted for men to move lower, move forward, make room, stay down. If a ship reached Britain, the work did not end. Men got off, the ship was made ready, and then it went back. A crew saw the damage on its own ship and still knew that the beaches were full. The same vessel could become part of a rhythm, cross to Dunkirk, load men, return to Britain, unload, prepare, and cross again. The words sound simple, but each crossing carried the chance of fire, water, metal, darkness, and loss.
On some days, losses forced changes. Daylight movement became more dangerous, so more evacuation happened at night. Darkness helped hide the ships, but it also made navigation harder. The cost showed on the ships themselves. One vessel arrived with smoke marks on its side. Another limped back damaged, too hurt to return at once. Men on deck looked across the water and saw fire where a ship had been hit. For the next line waiting on the mole, the way home could also sink. Night made the rescue quieter, but not easier. A dark ship could be safer from aircraft, yet harder to find from the shore. Men who had waited all day had to climb aboard when their bodies wanted to sleep. At night, a soldier did not always see the face of the person helping him. He felt a hand, a rope, a deck, and the sudden push of bodies behind him. The channel was not always an enemy. For much of the evacuation, the sea stayed unusually calm. That calm water helped small boats, loaded vessels, and exhausted men who otherwise faced even greater danger. The weather did not save Dunkirk alone, but it gave the rescuers a narrow gift. By the end of May, what first looked like a small emergency withdrawal had become the removal of a large part of an army. Still, the landward ring was closing. The ships came only because someone else was holding the edge. Chapter 5. The Men Who Held the Ring. The beach story is easier to picture than the defensive ring, but without that ring, there would have been no beach rescue. A defensive ring means soldiers hold a line around a place, stopping the enemy long enough for something else to happen behind them. In Dunkirk, that something else was evacuation. Every ship leaving the mole depended on men fighting away from the water. Every small boat coming in depended on roads and exit spots staying open. Every hour of loading depended on the enemy not breaking through too soon. French soldiers were not simply waiting to be rescued by British ships. Many were part of the defense. In the final phase, French troops held much of the shrinking defensive ring while evacuation continued. Belgium surrendered on May 28. That made the Allied position worse. German pressure increased. The pocket became smaller, and the beach area became more crowded. By June 2nd, the last British units were leaving. The defensive ring was mainly held by French forces. British soldiers also fought hard, but the final story must include the French soldiers who stayed while others left. On the beach, a man watched the water and hoped for a boat. On the defensive edge, another man watched the road and hoped the boats had enough time.
The defenders' world was different from the beach. It was not a line moving slowly toward ships. It was a road, a village edge, a canal, a field, or a street that had to be held a little longer. A little longer could mean one more ship loaded. One more hour could mean thousands more men moved through the mole. The final days carried this hard exchange: time for the beach, danger for the ring. On a road outside the town, a French soldier crouches near a canal wall and tightens his grip on his rifle strap. He cannot see the whole beach. He hears guns, engines, and aircraft, but his task is smaller and heavier. Hold the road, hold the canal crossing, keep the enemy from reaching the evacuation area too soon. For the men holding the ring, hope did not look like a boat coming closer. It looked like the line still holding its sunset, even when the sound from the beach meant other men were leaving. Some men escaped because other men did not. During the last nights, more French troops were evacuated. Ships still came, men still boarded in darkness. The rescue did not stop as soon as the last British units left. On June 3rd and the morning of June 4th, many of the soldiers taken off were French. Then the time ran out. German forces entered Dunkirk on June 4th, and many remaining defenders became prisoners. For those men, Dunkirk did not end with tea at a British station or a train ride home. It ended with capture. More than 338,000 Allied soldiers were saved, but others were killed, wounded, captured, or left behind. Heavy equipment was abandoned. Vehicles, guns, ammunition, and supplies did not come home in the same way men did. The beaches emptied, but the war did not. France was still falling, Britain was still in danger, and the men who came home carried the knowledge that others had paid for those extra hours. Chapter 6. Not victory. When the ships reached Britain, the men who stepped ashore did not look like victors. They looked exhausted. Some had not washed properly for days. Some had no rifle. Some had lost their units. Some were too tired to speak much. At ports and railway stations, civilians tried to help. They gave tea, food, cigarettes, and directions. A tired soldier stood in wet clothes while steam rose from a cup in his hands. Then a railway worker guided him toward a train before he fully understood that he was safe. Safe did not mean whole. The British Army had returned with not much of its heavy equipment. Guns, tanks, trucks, and supplies were left behind in France. For a soldier stepping off a ship, the cost could be simpler and heavier. Friends missing, rifle gone, boots still wet, life saved because another unit held a road for one more hour. A returned soldier could answer his own family's questions simply by walking through the door. Other families had to wait for lists, letters, rumors, or official notice. A man might be safe in Britain, while another man from the same unit was a prisoner on the other side of the Channel. News of the rescue lifted public feeling in Britain. Newspapers and speeches turned Dunkirk into a story of courage and national will. People had crossed the Channel to help. Naval crews had taken terrible risks. Small boats had gone into shallow water. Soldiers had waited under attack. French defenders had bought time.
But Churchill knew the danger of telling the story too simply. On June 4, 1940, he spoke in the House of Commons. His speech is remembered for the promise that Britain would fight on. He spoke of fighting on seas, in the air, on beaches, in fields, in streets, and in hills. Before those famous fighting words, he gave a warning. People should not treat the evacuation as a victory. Wars are not won by evacuations. In the weeks after Dunkirk, France fell. Britain faced the war with the Channel as its front line. The soldiers who came home had to be reorganized, re-equipped, and prepared to defend the island. If the army had been lost, Britain would have faced invasion fears with far fewer trained soldiers. Because so many men returned, the country had a force to rebuild around. For the families who saw men return, Dunkirk could feel like mercy. For families who waited and heard nothing, or for French soldiers captured after holding the defensive ring, it could feel very different. Near the end of the evacuation, a soldier could step from a crowded ship onto British ground with sea salt still drying on his uniform. A volunteer might hand him tea in a chipped cup. A railway worker might touch his elbow and point him toward a train. But across the Channel, the beaches, roads, and broken equipment remained. So did the prisoners. So did the soldiers who had held the ring until the last hours. The soldier was home, but the war was not.